Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad and these are the headlines. EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen has threatened to halt exports of the AstraZeneca vaccine if the bloc doesn't receive its promised deliveries. Meanwhile, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan and First Lady Bushra Begum have tested positive for COVID-19. The country has recorded 3,876 cases overnight, the highest since July. There were also 42 more deaths, taking the total to nearly 13,800. Pentagon Chief Lloyd Austin says he raised the issue of India's human rights violations with Indian ministers during his visit to New Delhi. Earlier, U.S. Senator Robert Menendez said India-U.S. ties must rest on New Delhi's adherence to democratic values. Austin is the first ever U.S. Defense Secretary to include India on his maiden foreign trip with eye on China. Afghanistan's top negotiator Abdullah has called for accelerating peace talks and a comprehensive ceasefire in the country. He was speaking on his return to Kabul after attending a conference on Afghan peace in Moscow. Abdullah said the event will help boost the ongoing intra-Afghan talks and will support an upcoming meeting in Turkey. Earlier, Pakistan repeated its resolve to facilitate a political settlement in Afghanistan, but warned against the role of spoilers. In Myanmar, another protester has been killed during anti-coup demonstrations in Yangon. Activists say 238 protesters have been killed in the military crackdown since the February 1st coup. Meanwhile, Twitter has suspended the Information Ministry's account under its manipulation and spam policy. In Thailand, police have used water cannon to stop anti-government protesters from advancing towards the Grand Palace in Bangkok. They are calling for Prime Minister PERU resignation and reforms to the country's powerful monarchy. The rally comes after Parliament failed to pass a bill to rewrite the military-backed constitution. And in cricket, Afghanistan beat Zimbabwe by 47 runs in the third and final T20 to clean sweep the three-match series. Chasing a target of 184 runs, Zimbabwe managed to score on only 136 with a loss of 5 wickets. Najibullah Zadran was declared man of the match for his hard-hitting 74 runs. Those were the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan and the First Lady Bushra Begum have tested positive for the COVID-19. Special Assistant to the Prime Minister on National Health Services, Faisal Sultan, said they are currently self-isolating at their home. Khan received the first shot of his COVID-19 vaccine on Thursday. The country has recorded 3,876 cases overnight, the highest since July. There were also 42 more deaths, taking the total to nearly 13,800. Health officials say Pakistan's positivity ratio has jumped to nearly 10%. EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen has threatened to halt exports of the AstraZeneca vaccine if the bloc doesn't receive its promised deliveries. She said the firm delivered only 30% of the 90 million doses it promised for the first quarter of the year. More in this report.
The EU is struggling to accelerate its vaccination program, with the third wave of cases bearing down on many parts of the continent. Earlier, the World Health Organization gave strong backing to the AstraZeneca COVID-19 jab, urging countries to maintain the rollout. Over in the United Kingdom, more than half the adult population have now received their first jab. This comes as hundreds of protesters in central London staged a demonstration against lockdown measures. Meanwhile, France and Poland have reintroduced partial lockdowns as both countries battled a sharp rise in cases in recent weeks. Some 21 million people in 16 areas of France, including the capital Paris, are affected. In Portugal, authorities say passengers arriving from South Africa via other countries will have to quarantine for 14 days. The number of global coronavirus deaths has surpassed 2.7 million, while the caseload has exceeded 122 million.
Pentagon Chief Lloyd Austin says he raised the issue of India's human rights violations with Indian ministers during his visit to New Delhi. Responding to a media query, he said human rights and the rule of law is important to the U.S. Prior to his visit, U.S. Senator Robert Menendez expressed concerns over the deteriorating situation of democracy in India. He also slammed India's crackdown on protesting farmers and its actions in occupied Kashmir. The senator said India-U.S. ties must rest on New Delhi's adherence to democratic values. Austin is the first ever U.S. Defense Secretary to include India on his maiden foreign trip with eye on China. Meanwhile, hundreds of farmers have left northern Punjab to join the protest against centre's contentious farm laws along Delhi borders. During their journey on tractors, the farmers raised slogans against the federal government. Many farmers, accompanied by their families, have camped at the three sites on the outskirts of the Indian capital. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government offered to suspend the laws for 18 months, but the farmers have refused to back down, demanding the repeal of the reforms they say will jeopardize their living. Kabul says it calls for the acceleration in peace talks, an immediate end to violence and a comprehensive ceasefire in Afghanistan. Kabul's top negotiator Abdullah said this on return from Moscow conference. Abdullah said the event was a step forward to boost the Doha talks and support Turkey's meeting on Afghanistan. He also lauded the joint statement of the extended troika on peaceful Afghan settlement. Earlier, Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi warned against the role of spoilers in the peace process. Speaking to his Afghan counterpart Hanif Atmar over the phone, Qureshi said all sides must work constructively for a peaceful Afghanistan. Despite peace process, the Taliban and the government have reported casualties of the other sides in attacks on different parts of the country. In Myanmar, another protester has been killed during anti-coup demonstrations in Yangon. It comes amid increased international pressure on the military generals to shun violence. 2 more people were killed overnight after soldiers opened fire in the northern ruby mining town of Mogok. Meanwhile, Twitter has suspended the Information Ministry's account under its manipulation and spam policy. Earlier, UN Rapporteur Tom Andrews called for sanctions in response to Army's ruthless attacks. In another development, the U.S. House of Representatives has approved legislation condemning the military coup. Activists say 238 protesters have been killed in the military crackdown since the February 1st coup. In Thailand, Thai police have used water cannons at anti-government protesters to stop them from advancing towards the Grand Palace. The rally comes after Parliament failed to pass a bill to rewrite the military-backed constitution, which is one of the protesters' main demands. The protest movement has posed the biggest challenge so far to Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha. They accuse him of political engineering in 2019 election to maintain the status quo. The protesters are also demanding reforms to the country's powerful monarchy. Arab coalition says it has destroyed another Houthi drone launched towards Saudi Arabia. The coalition says the explosive-laden drone was intercepted over the southern Saudi city of Khamis Mushaid. Earlier, Riyadh accused Tehran of supporting Yemeni rebels' attacks on the kingdom. In an interview, Saudi Minister of State for Foreign Affairs Adil Al-Jubair said Houthis carried out the attacks using Iranian weapons. Al-Jubair said the presence of what he called the Iranian-backed separatists does not mean peace is impossible in Yemen. Earlier, the U.S. condemned the latest Houthi attacks on a Saudi oil refinery in capital Riyadh. The UAE, Kuwait, Qatar and Lebanon also condemned the attack, describing it as a threat to regional stability. China says the strategic dialogue with the United States was candid, constructive, and helpful. The two-day talks mark the first high-level contact between the two countries since President Joe Biden took office.
Talking to media after the conclusion of 3 rounds of tough and direct talks in Alaska, China's top diplomat Yang Jiechi said some important differences still persist. Foreign Minister Wang Yi said Beijing hopes Washington will meet it halfway with mutual respect. Wang reiterated that sovereignty and territorial integrity are major issues of principle. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the two sides had a very candid conversation on an expansive agenda. Talking to reporters, Blinken said the world's top economies found areas where their interests overlap. He added these include Iran, North Korea, Afghanistan, and climate change.
U.S. prosecutors have charged 10 Iranian nationals over an alleged long-running scheme to dodge sanctions on Tehran. They tried to disguise $300 million in transactions, including the purchase of 2 oil tankers. All 10 defendants have been charged with conspiracy to violate legal sanctions against Iran. The prosecutor said that 8 men and 2 women are outside the U.S. and have not been arrested. They said the defendants conspired to abuse the U.S. financial system to conduct transactions on behalf of the Iranian government. The U.S. government has also filed a civil forfeiture action seeking more than $157 million. In Iraq, a civilian has been killed and 2 security personnel injured after a bomb blast in the northern Saladin province. No group has yet claimed the responsibility, but authorities suspect ISIS was behind the attack. Security forces have launched a manhunt for the perpetrators. Since the start of this year, ISIS terrorists have stepped up attacks, particularly in the area between Kirkuk, Saladin, and Diyala. Turkey has told the EU it has maintained a constructive approach in the Mediterranean despite provocations from Greece and Cyprus. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan held a virtual meeting with the European Union chiefs.
Tensions have flared over a dispute between Turkey and Greece over maritime jurisdiction in the Mediterranean. In the meeting, the Turkish presidency said Erdogan repeated a proposal for a regional Eastern Mediterranean conference. In a statement, it said the president expects a result from the upcoming EU summit that will pave the way for concrete efforts to move forward. Erdogan said the migrant burden on Turkey is rising. In a separate statement, the European Commission said it underlined the importance of sustained de-escalation. Meanwhile, the Turkish Coast Guard said they found 3 migrants dead in waters of the Aegean coastal town of Sisme after Greek Coast Guard beat them. The Greek Coast Guard rejected accusations, saying they do not treat migrants or people in danger that way.
International Criminal Court has sent notifications to Israel and Palestine of the opening of a war crimes probe. In a statement, the prosecutor's office said the parties have 1 month to seek a deferral. Earlier this month, the ICC prosecutor Fatou Bensouda said she would formally investigate war crimes in the Palestinian territories. While Palestinian Authority welcomed the announcement, Israel denounced it. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia has affirmed that its position on Israel remains unchanged. Saudi Minister of State for Foreign Affairs Adil Al-Jubair said the recent normalization deals will pay off only if they change Israel's position with regards to the annexation of the Palestinian territory. In France, Muslim leaders have slammed a decision to ban the slaughter of poultry animals in line with Islamic principles ahead of the holy month of Ramadan. In a joint statement, the leaders said the French decision sends a negative message to the large Muslim community in the country. Under the new rule, the Islamic slaughter of poultry animals will be banned in France from July. The leaders conveyed their concerns to the relevant ministry but did not receive any concrete results. The Muslim leaders have also discussed the matter with the leaders of the Jewish community in France. Other European countries have taken similar steps against halal meat, irking Muslim communities. President Joe Biden has deplored a recent surge in anti-Asian violence in the United States. This comes after a deadly shooting rampage in Georgia left 8 people dead, including 6 women of Asian descent. During a visit to Georgia, Biden met leaders and state lawmakers from the Asian American community. Speaking after the meeting, Biden asked all Americans to stand together against hate. Vice President Kamala Harris, who is of Asian American descent, also accompanied the president. Harris said racism, xenophobia, and sexism have always been real in America.
Over the past year, 3,800 such incidents have been reported, 2 of 3 by women. Everything from physical assaults to verbal accusations. And it's all harmful. And sadly, it's not new. Racism is real in America, and it has always been. Xenophobia is real in America and always has been. Sexism too.
Meanwhile, New Yorkers gathered for a vigil in support of victims of the Georgia attacks. Now moving on, the US and Chinese ambassador to the United Nations have clashed over racism. The argument took place during a General Assembly meeting to mark the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. US Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield said racism continues to be a daily challenge. However, she added, for millions of peoples in countries like China and Myanmar, it is deadly. In response, China's Deputy UN Ambassador Dai Bing said the US has no license to tell other countries what to do. Dai said Thomas-Greenfield admitted to her country's ignoble human rights record. He called on the US to address racial discrimination, social injustice, and police brutality on its soil. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, at least 25 people have been killed after a large truck smashed into 3 vehicles on the road to the eastern city of Goma. Officials say the accident took place due to a braking system failure. Deadly traffic accidents are common in DR Congo, where mostly dirt roads are poorly maintained. The National Road Safety Body said there were nearly 1,900 accidents in North Kivu alone in 2019, which claimed the lives of 261 people. 13 people have been killed and 7 others wounded in several attacks in Nigeria's northwestern Kano state. Authorities say the gunmen attacked communities in Zangon Kataf, Koru, and Chikun areas of the state. They said assailants razed 56 houses, 16 motorcycles, and burnt several barns. Officials said troops were mobilized to repel the attacks. The gangs, locally known as bandits, burn and ransack villages and target schools for kidnappings for ransom. A 7.2 magnitude earthquake has struck off the coast of northeastern Japan, generating a tsunami of 1 meter. It struck the same area that was devastated a decade ago by a quake and tsunami. There were no immediate reports of deaths or injuries, but the quake was strong enough to shake buildings in Tokyo, which are almost 400 kilometers away. An official for the Met Agency told reporters it was an aftershock of the deadly 2011 quake. About an hour after the quake, all tsunami alerts were lifted after warning the public not to go near the shore. In Peru, heavy rain, floods and mudslides have cut off communities and left families homeless in the northern Piura region. More than 3,600 families in the remote mountainous area are left stranded after 5 bridges collapsed. The locals say they have no access to drinking water and electricity. Authorities say the homeless may have to be permanently relocated to avoid similar incidents in the future. Housing Minister Solange Fernandez toured the region to assess the damage. In Australia's New South Wales, a potentially life-threatening downpour has forced multiple evacuation orders from authorities. The rains have flooded rivers and streets, cut power lines, and caused a major Sydney dam to spill over. Officials say they had issued 9 evacuation orders for about 15 areas. Emergency services said a mini tornado ripped through a suburb in the west of Sydney, causing damage to more than 30 homes. Most of the coast of the state has already seen March rainfall records broken, but authorities warn the downpour is likely to continue for several days. In Iceland, a volcano has erupted near the capital, Reykjavik, following weeks of seismic activity. The country's Met Office says the fissure took place near Fagradalsfjall mountain on Reykjanes Peninsula. Authorities said the eruption posed no immediate danger to people or critical infrastructure. The weather agency said aviation is not expected to suffer either, as the volcano will not spew out much ash or smoke. The last eruption of the Reykjanes Peninsula was some 800 years ago. Iceland has also recorded more than 40,000 earthquakes in the past 3 weeks. Turkey has withdrawn from the international accord designed to protect women despite objections from campaigners. The Istanbul Convention seeks to prevent, prosecute and eliminate domestic violence. It signed the Council of Europe's convention 10 years ago at its launch in Istanbul. Turkish conservatives argue its principles undermine family values, but Europe's top human rights body has described the decision as devastating for efforts to combat domestic violence. Turkey's Family Minister Zahra Zumrut said women's rights are protected by the country's constitution. French daredevil Valentin Deluc took to the sky with some death-defying stunts at an abandoned ski resort in France. More in this report.
Deluc turned the deserted Evoria resort into his own personal playground as he sped right across it. All geared up, he first took off from the snow-capped mountains to paraglide over and through the resort. While in the air, he launched off the rooftops and even ground his skis on a chairlift cable. He then landed to put on some insane ground tricks, including a backflip through an igloo. While keeping his glider intact on the ground, he again lifted off to the sky by fastening a ride from a horse-drawn sleigh. The 28-year-old started as an alpine free skier and paraglider before combining the two disciplines to master the field of speed riding. Deluc dominated the tour in 2014.
A breathtaking art exhibit is drenching viewers in a kaleidoscope-like world in New York's Chelsea market. More in this report.
Embark upon a cinematic journey where the sheer beauty of mathematics, nature, and architecture coincide to inspire introspection and awe. Using fractals, mathematical equations represented as infinitely repeating patterns, Dutch artist Julius HOUTHI manifested an art installation, running them through a computer software.
Julius, as I know, came across fractals while doing research for a separate project and instantly felt a connection with them. He was fascinated by how through mathematics you could take someone on a journey through almost an entirely new world. He has a background in film, and he was able to kind of combine that passion with fractal art, and in the same way that, you know, a documentary takes you through a journey of something in our real world, Julius, as the fractal artist, is able to take an audience on a journey through these fractal worlds.
Spectators have said it feels like being inside of a kaleidoscope, or like stepping into a science fiction world, or even being transmitted to a totally new dimension.
In the age we're living in, and after, you know, over a year of pandemic, and for a lot of people being isolated, we need something like this more than ever. I think art for a lot of people can be an escape or a refuge.
Geometric Properties runs through September 6th at Artec House.
It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Welcome back. In Turkey, a tropical-looking turquoise lake in the southwestern town of Yatagan worries environmentalists. It contains heavy metals such as selenium, cadmium, boron and others. More about this lake in this report.
Known as an ash dam, the toxic lake is composed of wastewater and polluted ash that are generated by the nearby Yatagan power plant. Locals fear the metals leaking into the earth and groundwater will cause health problems.
Its beauty is coming from its toxic structure, so it doesn't look beautiful to the residents of the village, of the surrounding village, or to the environmentalists. So actually that's the reason it's being a toxic lake. It's not a natural one.
Campaigners say pollution from the coal mine and burn at Yatagan has led to major environmental damage. Ash Dam is one of the 15 wastewater lakes in Turkey that they fight to stop from causing further damage to nature.
The coal plants were allowed to operate without the disposal sites meeting no environmental standards or criteria. So that's why it's a very important decision, and we hope that the final decision of the court will be as such. And yeah, this decision will give the public authorities the power of shutting down, stopping the operation of those irresponsibly operating coal plants.
Earlier this month, the campaigners won a legal victory. The State Council issued a decision cancelling a law that postpones filtration requirements in thermal power plants. As per the decision, all thermal power plants that operate without modernized filters will have to stop their operations until they meet the standards.
Another business updates. In the U.S. state of Texas, a federal jury has directed Apple to pay over $300 million to personalized media communications. The tech giant was charged with infringing a patent related to digital rights management. The licensing firm sued Apple in 2015, alleging that the firm's iTunes service infringed 7 of its patents. Apple successfully challenged the personalized media communications case at the U.S. Patent Office, but an appeals court reversed that decision in March last year and paved the way for the trial. However, the iPhone maker says it is disappointed with the ruling and will appeal. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.